Okay, guys, let's have a look at Act 3, Scene 1 of Macbeth. This is a really interesting scene. I like that image. That's the great Orson Welles, American actor, genius, Shakespearean actor, filmmaker, lots of things, writer. That's him playing Macbeth. Just look at the eyes there. Look at the eyes. Look at this, the darkness, the sense of brooding anger, the threat that Welles captures. And of course, this is why this scene is so interesting, because there was this idea in Macbeth's mind, certainly in Lady Macbeth's mind, that what the missing piece in his life was the crown. And that once he became king, he would find contentment, that he would find a sense of purpose. So he killed the king in order to attain that. But now that he's king, he's more miserable than he ever was before, because he's paranoid. He knows that having killed the king, he now set himself up to be assassinated. But also because he knows that he's paid a very heavy price for the crown, which is his eternal soul will be damned, because God is, remember those words? Omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. God is all powerful, all knowing, and everywhere. And God knows what he did, and God will ultimately punish him. So this is the first of the scenes in which we see kind of this new Macbeth, this scary, he was always covered in blood, but this scary, the tyrant, the monster that Macbeth turns into begins to emerge in this scene. Let's have a quick look through it. I'll go through the summary part relatively quickly. This is not Jack and Ori, I'm not going to read to you, I want you to read it. So I'll go through this relatively quickly and then look at the quotes. So by this stage of the play, he's king. So he's been crowned King of Scotland. And the first thing here is we meet Banquo. Now don't forget, Banquo is Macbeth's colleague, his best friend, his comrade, his fellow warrior and hero of Scotland. Banquo was there when the witches tempted Macbeth, and the witches gave Banquo his own prophecy, which of course, thou shalt get kings, though thou be none. And Banquo appears on stage and he delivers a soliloquy. And the soliloquy that he delivers is tremendously interesting. Don't forget, a soliloquy is a speech in which the private thoughts of the character are revealed to the audience. And in the soliloquy, he voices concerns about Macbeth. He thinks that Macbeth may have killed the king. Now, this is interesting, because while Banquo is in this play a representative of virtue, he's one of the good people. Like, for example, in Shakespeare's King Lear, you have Cordelia and Edgar, and in all the plays you have characters who represent decency. Bianca and Othello. In Hamlet you have Ophelia. You have people who represent decency, honour, goodness. But Banquo's, like, as I said before about the characters in this play, it's what I love about the characters in the play. There's a subtlety to them. There's a fair amount under the surface, because if he does believe that Macbeth has killed the king, then his duty is to fight Macbeth. His duty certainly is to go to who he believes to be the rightful king, and the rightful heir to Duncan was Malcolm, Duncan's oldest son, because Duncan in Act 1, Scene 4 made him the Prince of Cumberland. But Banquo does not challenge Macbeth, and he does not go to Malcolm as he should, and that's because he has his own ambition. He like Macbeth, he harbours ambitions. And in this little scene, he says, well, if Macbeth's prophecy came true, maybe mine will. And of course, the difference between Macbeth and Banquo, as Banquo said to Macbeth in Act 1, Scene 7, what Banquo said in that scene was, I am ambitious, I want to be successful. Sorry, it was actually Act 1, Scene 2. Sorry, I'll rephrase. Act 2, Scene 1. The "Is this a dagger I see before me" scene, where he said it. He said, so I lose none in seeking to augment it, which meant that, yeah, I'm ambitious, and yeah, I want to do well in life, and yeah, I want to achieve my goals, but I'm not willing to break the law, the moral law, the ethical law, the laws of honour to achieve my goals. That's the difference between the two men. Macbeth appears on stage, and when he first appears with the crown on his head, he appears in jocular or good humour. And we soon learn, and he kind of jokes around with Banquo, and he says to Banquo, look, I'm having a party this evening, make sure you're there. Banquo says, well, myself and my son, we're going out for some exercise, we're going to take the horses out and go for a ride. And Macbeth says, oh, make sure you're back on time, fail not our feast, he says. And what we realise is that Banquo doesn't challenge Macbeth about his thoughts, and we realise that the two men are dancing around each other, that they're pretending to be something they're not, that the bond they once had is gone. So they're deceiving or attempting to deceive each other by their behaviour. Banquo tells Macbeth he intends to go riding before the feast. I've said that. And then he leaves. And that's when Macbeth delivers his third great soliloquy. Don't forget the first great soliloquy. There's a soliloquy in Act 1, Scene 2. It's a really good soliloquy, but it's not one of the top tier ones. The first great one is the one where he talks about his vaulting ambition in Act 1, Scene 5. The second great one, Act 1, Scene 7. The second great one is this the dagger I see before me in Act 2, Scene 1. The third one is here. And it's really, really, really interesting, because it gives an insight into the mindset that Macbeth has formed since becoming king. And it shows his paranoia and his kind of ruthless nature. He says he's resentful of the idea that Banquo's descendants will be kings. That if the prophecy that the witches gave Banquo comes true, as he believes his prophecy came true. And don't forget, Macbeth's prophecy would not have come true had he not decided to kill the king. So the idea that the witches made him king is nonsense. But anyway, that doesn't suit his narrative. So he doesn't like the idea that Banquo's sons will become kings, because he has paid such a heavy price for the crown. He describes it as his eternal jewel he's given to man's enemy. He's given off his soul to the devil in order to become king. And he feels that if his sons don't, we don't know, does he have any children? Lady Macbeth talks about having born children. But he says, if Banquo's sons get to inherit the throne and his sons don't, well then he's made this bargain with the devil for nothing. And he can't have that. He can't see somebody else benefit from his suffering. He reveals also his jealousy of Banquo. He thinks Banquo's a good man, so he's moral and ethical. So when he looks at Banquo, he kind of sees what he used to be before he killed the king, before he was corrupted. So he doesn't want to be reminded of his failures, so Banquo has to go. He says, I'm going to kill Banquo, his best friend. And the crucial thing is that the speech shows that he has no moral qualms, no doubts, no questions about whether or not this is the right thing to do. He's no longer, doing what he did when he talked about, the king being, his family member and his king and his virtues pleading like angels, trumpet tongued against the deep damnation of his taken off. Remember that where he was tortured by conscience and, could he do this? Is this a dagger I see before me, the handle toward my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. Where he was aware that what he was going to do was wrong, but he felt that, he couldn't resist it. And then even after he killed the king and his hands were covered in blood, but all great Neptune's oceans washed this blood. Whatever that sense of conscience that we saw in him, it seems to have gone now. He seems to be twisted now, bitter, angry, corrupted completely by the regicide. And we learn that he has hired 3 knights, 3 guys who had been banished by his predecessor Duncan for their behaviour. And he's hired them to murder Banquo. They arrive in, the 2 of them arrive in, and he lies to them and he says, look, the reason that you had troubles in the past was because of Banquo, so I want you to kill Banquo. And then I want you to cover up the crime. Do it at night time. I don't want to be associated with it. And then, of course, hugely importantly, he orders them to murder Fleance. Now, Fleance is Banquo's son. And here we have Macbeth ordering the murder of a child. And that murder of a child is something that we see repeatedly in the play. This idea of Macbeth's association with the death of children. And of course, as a society, our duty is to protect children. It is part of everything that we instinctively understand about human nature, that children are vulnerable and therefore it is our duty to protect them. When Macbeth orders the murder of Fleance, when he orders the murder of later in the play of Macduff's wife and children, when he kills young Seward at the end of the play, young Seward who is yet old enough to grow a beard, so he's a young teenage boy. When Macbeth kills these young, or tries to kill or kills these young people, it's all symbolic of just how badly things have gone wrong for him, how unnatural his behaviour is, how reprehensible his behaviour is, how corrupted he has become. That's a motif. A motif is a repeated symbol in a piece of writing. So let's have a look at the key quotes. Banquo, thou hast it now, king, Cawdor, Glams, so that was what the witches, all as the weird women promised. And I fear, And I fear thou playest most foully forward. Marking that in blue because it wouldn't be a top of the list learner, but it's a good quote. So is that what he's saying? He's saying, I think you killed the king. Now again, as I said earlier on, if Banquo thinks Macbeth killed the king, well then Banquo has a duty, and that duty is to attack Macbeth, or if not that, to go and serve Malcolm or Donalbain. He does neither of those things. Why? Because he too is ambitious. He too is interesting because he's not perfect, because he's flawed. He says, well, if it came true for Macbeth, maybe it's going to come true for me. So he's tempted by the witch's prophecy that his sons will be kings, and he wants to stick around and see what happens. And of course, that's evidence of the fact that he's not corrupt, but he's not this kind of unbelievably virtuous. No human being is completely virtuous, and neither is Banquo. Macbeth, when he speaks to Banquo, shows himself lying, or so we see him lying and using deception to try to divert attention from his guilt. He tells Banquo, we hear our bloody cousin. So he says our because that's the royal we. Royal kings and queens use the plural personal pronoun, not the singular personal pronoun, because they represent themselves and the state. So our cousins, that's his cousins Malcolm and Donalbain, he calls them bloody because he's associating them with killing their father. And he says they are bestowed in England and in Ireland, not confessing their cruel parricide. And parricide is a corruption of the word patricide, which means to kill your father. So Macbeth is accusing them of killing their father. We know that's not true because we know that Macbeth did it. He doesn't show any moral qualms at tainting these two boys with this terrible crime, anything to protect himself. He is an odious, unpleasant human being. And then we get the soliloquy, and the soliloquy is Magnifico. And his brooding, his sense of resentment, doing that thing. In King Lear, won't go off on a tangent now, one of the characters comments on how human beings have a tendency that when we are sick in fortune, it's often the consequence of our own behaviour. But we make guilty of our disasters the sun, the moon and the stars. And what he means is that usually when things go wrong in our lives, if you want to really know the truth, it's our own fault. We've done something that has, not always, but often, we've done something that caused our misery. But instead of accepting our role in that, we like to transfer the blame. Now here we see in this soliloquy, Macbeth starting to blame the witches for what's happened to him. And of course, while the witches are culpable and while the witches have tempted him and did play a role in what happened, ultimately, their powers are limited. Remember the sailor's wife story? Though his spark cannot be lost, yet it shall be tempest tossed. While the witches are culpable, ultimately, the responsibility for where he is now lies with himself. But he doesn't want to accept that. He says, to be thus is nothing. Oh, bloody hell. He says, to be thus is nothing but to be safely thus. What's the point of being king if I can't be secure as king? Now, even that is ironic, because if you go back and look at the quotes from Act 1, Scene 7, when Macbeth gives that famous 7-1 soliloquy, he said in that soliloquy that if he kills a king, well then other people are going to want to kill him. He's making it okay to kill a king. So he knew that in killing Duncan and seizing the crown, he wouldn't have security. But here he is now saying, I need security. And then he thinks about Banquo and he's envious of him. 'Tis much he dares, and to that dauntless temper of his mind, he has a wisdom that does guide his valour to act in safety. So look at the words he's using to describe Banquo. He's daring, he is dauntless, that means fearless, he's wise, he is brave. So Banquo has all these qualities that Macbeth sees as admirable qualities. And of course, Macbeth, therefore, envies him. And like, one of the books that's up there is, well, quite a lot of books that are up there are about Joseph Stalin. He's a very fascinating figure from 20th century history. The one thing you didn't want to do was get Stalin jealous of you, because you were gone if you did. Psychopaths don't like to have the spotlight taken off them. So the fact that Banquo was a good man, this shows again how corrupted Macbeth has become. The fact that Banquo was a good man makes him a target for Macbeth. So he's jealous, and he says, "There is none but he whose being I do fear, and under him my genius is rebuked." He then talks about the witches, and he says, resentfully, God in heaven, that drives me mad now. I'm after tapping that twice. He says, I'll try it again. There we go. He says, "Upon my head they placed a fruitless crown and put a barren scepter in my grip." Now, guys, the crown and the scepter, they're, of course, this, symbols of royal authority. The crown on the head and the scepter, the staff that kings hold, is a symbol of their power. So he's saying, and when he says fruitless, he's referring to the idea of not being able to have children. Now, there he's referring to the idea that his kids won't inherit his power, that the power will go to Banquo. Now, the most important thing is this, right? He knew that before he killed the king. He knew Banquo's prophecy before he killed the king. So if he believes the witches have the power of prophecy to make things come true, then why did he bother killing the king, knowing that he'll kill him, and then, somewhere along the line, Banquo will be the one to benefit. So here he is, and he's backtracking, and he's revived. This is like revisionist history, and he's feeling sorry for himself. And in fact, he knew all this before he did it. But the crucial thing is, he says that the witches put the crown on his head and put the scepter in his grip. I know it's spelled gripe, but it's grip, right, in his hand. But of course, guys, the witches did not put the crown on his head. And the witches did not put the scepter in his hand. Macbeth did that. The witches didn't kill Duncan. The witches didn't put a spell on Macbeth and take away his free will and make him do something that he didn't want to do. Macbeth did that. So here he is blaming the witches for the circumstances that he put himself in. He is no longer a hero. He is no longer somebody we admire. He is petty. He is looking for excuses, and he is very, very dangerous and scary, because he has the power of the king, royal authority, and he also has a reputation as a bloody killer. So what's going to happen to those who he is angry with? He is furious with the idea that Banquo's children will inherit the throne. And he says, if it be so, if Banquo's prophecy is to come true, for Banquo's issue have I filed my mind. For them, the gracious Duncan, have I murdered. And then he talks about giving his eternal jewel, his soul, to man's common enemy. The eternal jewel is a gorgeous little metaphor. Man's common enemy is the devil. His eternal jewel is his soul. He says, if Banquo's prophecy comes true, then I have destroyed my mind, corrupted myself for Banquo's children. Issue means children. If the prophecy comes true, then I have killed Duncan, who is gracious, so God's anointed, so I am damned myself to hell for Banquo. If the prophecy comes true, then Banquo's going to benefit from me giving my soul away to the devil. And he says, no, I'm not having that. So he knew all of this before he committed the crime. He has nobody to blame but himself. But he's lashing out now, and he's dangerous, and it's compelling to watch him as he gets sucked into this kind of moral vacuum of paranoia and violence. This is famously the speech that he gives to the three murderers. And he, first of all, again, uses deception when he says to them, and his tone is very gentle. He says, no, that it was he in times past which held you so under fortune, which you thought had been, some of my favourite words in the play, our innocent self. It's so funny that Macbeth describes himself as innocent. There's nothing innocent about him. He's a butcher, he's a killer, he's a regicide. You know, he's a sinister, dangerous man. So he's saying, well, in the past, you know, the rumours were that I was the one who caused you trouble with Duncan. No, it wasn't me, it was Banquo. Of course, a lie. And then he says, and thence it is that I to your assistance do make love, masking the business from the common eye for sundry weighty reasons. I don't want people to know that I'm behind this. So get this done, get it done at night, make sure nobody knows it was you and I'll reward you. And then he says, Fleance his son, whose absence is no less material to me than is his father's, must embrace the fate of that dark hour. And there we have our hero. Remember what he was at the start of the play? Valor's minion, brave Macbeth. Well, he deserves that name. It is a peerless kinsman. Remember that fella? Like glowing in light and glory and praise. Remember that guy? Here he is, ordering the murder of an innocent child simply because he feels that that child is a threat to him because of what the witches said. Macbeth here is scary. He is paranoid. He is bloodthirsty. He is corrupt. The crime of regicide has transformed him, and the person that he was is no longer. Or maybe you can say, and this is a theory you can say, that this is always who Macbeth is, and the commission of the regicide has merely stripped away the veneer of heroism and respectability, revealing the rotten core at the heart of this man. Either way, what a great scene, what an interesting part of the play.